Streaming TV is everything these days, and eyeballs are shifting away from traditional television. The problem is knowing where marketers should start or how to make sure they get the best bang for their buck. This area of advertising is fragmented, and we're still trying to figure out how to consolidate and best measure reach. Welcome back to Marketing Trends. I'm Jeremy Bergeron, and today we have on Omer Latif from Elemental TV, a leading connected TV advertising technology company that is first to power the next generation of ad break experiences through its proprietary ELM technology and vertical ad formatting. So if you're wanting to know more about branching into streaming TV advertising and what the future of that technology is going to look like, this is an episode you can't miss. Let's get to it. Before we dive into this conversation, I wanted to say thank you to our partners at Salesforce. We bring marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing. Now let's get into it. So first question, a large percentage of marketers, 72% of marketers say meeting customer expectations is more difficult than it was a year ago. How has this played out for you? And what is your team doing to tackle the consistent challenge of rising customer expectations?
As a technology company, you always have to be ideating and listening to the customers and their needs. But when you throw in some exogenous factors such as the pandemic and a significant dislocation of resources between personnel and clients and customers alike, you have to kind of rethink the sandbox that you were operating in 24 months or so ago. So on one hand, you're trying to maintain a cadence of delivering product that you had set out, let's say, in a roadmap a couple of years ago. And then at the same time, you have to modify that and modulate your approach based on what the facts on the ground are dictating. From our perspective, what we saw was that we had a 5-year plan in our mind, and that has been short-circuited and compressed in, let's say, 12 months. And particularly our business is focused on delivering customizable ads, or as I refer to as personalized ads on digital TVs, smart TVs and alike. And when the world shut down, everyone, sat at home and dramatically increased their consumption of media on smart devices. Everything from a smart TV to an Apple TV, what have you, even on their mobile devices. So we had to rapidly fast forward a lot of our traction of the product that we were building. So it has been a dynamic process for us. And at the same time, remember, like there's a human element to it, which is like our team had to very quickly adapt to a work from home, remote environment as well. So it's a time like no other, and it's very hard for me to say what I would do different. But yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. 78% of marketing organizations have changed or reprioritized metrics due to the pandemic, due to the changes in the world the last couple of years. What has become of the most valuable metric for you and your team in this kind of new era?
Listening to our customers and being curious about what the needs are of the market, because unexpected things happen. So you have to be agile. And people use the word agile, and when we use it, obviously it's in the context of software development. But when you're being agile as a business, you have to have an element of vulnerability where you are willing to fail rapidly and develop and grow from it. So allowing my team to be able to be vulnerable and be agile at the same time, they both go hand in hand. And that allows us to keep up to date on the pulse of the market and our customers.
Wow. I love those two words, be vulnerable and agile. And you put those two together, and that's a powerful combination. You think of like moving something forward, right? And in the way of listening, like you said, cultivating this listening with the customer by being vulnerable, being agile, being able to respond quickly in, like you said, you had a 5-year plan that really got changed to 12 months because things are shifting rapidly. And so
Right.
I think I could also see how as a business organization, it's easy to think you need to pivot one way or the other and try to anticipate where we're going. Where you said, let's continue listening very intently and encouraging the team to be vulnerable and agile as we move forward, which I think that's a recipe for some really cool magic. Um, on that in that vein, what if any, what skill sets are or have become more valuable for your team now than they were, a couple of years ago? How have you invested in improving key skills? Are there any changes and shifts there?
Yeah, generally speaking, we have tried to over communicate ourselves within ourselves. We have moved away from quote unquote quarterly metrics or any measurements like that. We have focused more on um, how to communicate in writing, how to communicate when you come to a meeting, for example, how to be more efficient with your time. For example, we changed our working hours from the hours of between, it used to be like quote unquote 9 to 5, but now it's more like 9 to 3 p.m. Pacific time.
Wow.
And it's essentially over 2 years of doing that, we've realized that we can accomplish the same at any within the same time frame and be more efficient about it, and also trying to incorporate people's personal lives because my colleagues and myself, we have young families. um, when you're in the office, you can compartmentalize that to some extent, but when you're working from home or have a shared space that you have to share with your family, you have to kind of somehow try to make the best of what you can. So
How did the 9 to 3 thing come about? Was that kind of an internal suggestion? Was that like something you tested out before kind of scaling that around the company? That's really interesting.
uh it was more intuition more than anything else. It was like there was no data science or hard science behind it that we had. It felt like that we can accomplish the same, and primarily it was trying to be practical, getting the kids out of the house in the morning, walking them to school. By the time we come back and have breakfast and a cup of coffee, it's 8:30. So,
Right.
and by the time the kids come back from school, it's like 3:30. So incorporating that reality in our workflow kind of forced us to think more creatively about how efficiently we can use our time.
Wow, that's great. I mean, there's a lot of talk around, these kind of hybrid return to work models. You look at, of course, like the Googles and the News and Apples and like some of these bigger brands really, making some moves and saying, gotta come back at least a few days a week and gotta, do this and that. And I think it is interesting to go a layer deeper, like you have, to think, okay, now that we are working in this new way, what is actually needed for us to to meet the marketplace with something innovative and great and grow this business when kind of the rules have changed, and we don't need this 9 to 5 block of time always because that's the way it's always been done. Now
Right.
how do we build this ecosystem around this larger ecosystem of we working at home now and we're doing things a little bit differently? And I think that's really cool, and that's something that I want to kind of remember for even our own folks here and internally. And I think that's awesome because I think you're right. It puts you in this position of, okay, if I know that the finish line is 3, what do I get to do in this block now?
Right.
How much intention do I need? And and that just to me creates a lot of, yeah, people that would go after it. Especially if they're working in areas of the business that they love, which I assume you have there. But that's really cool. I like that, Omer. Let's shift into just anecdotally some of the things that I want to hear just your thoughts on this. What's something wise that your mentors or just folks that you respected taught you about leadership?
Interesting one. So I started my career in investment banking almost in 1998. This is right before the dot-com bubble. You may remember companies like Long-Term Capital Management, LTCM, Kidder Peabody. These banks were kind of unwinding themselves. So I had a great boss by the name of Peter Kind, and he said to me that because at some point I started assuming more managerial role and more responsible for personnel. And one thing that he always said to me was that when it came time to compensation for your team and allocating compensation across the team, and not just allocating it to, let's say, the top performer all the time, he always used to say to me, Umar, if you don't split $1 6 ways, you haven't done your job right. So I've always like thought of that, um, something that I keep in mind when it comes to leadership and developing talent and identifying people.
Split it out or 6 ways, meaning like be as lean as possible. That is that kind of the general.
No, no, it's like, I mean, if we are hyper competitive, we are all performance driven businesses, and we have been in those environments. And ultimately, um, thinking about not just yourself, but also the collective, the team, how to develop the team. And if, let's say, you have $1 to split between 6 people in your team members, and yes, of course, if you were to just pick purely performance as a metric, which could be like most sales or whatever, what have you, you'll allocate a disproportionate amount of that dollar to that individual. But you have to look at everything and the circumstances, and it comes down to how you develop the team, how you nurture the team, and
Okay.
how you cultivate the sense of unity amongst the team. So
Ah,
yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
no, that's great. No, I love that. It's just literally just before this interview, there's another show that I host called Business X Factors, and I was interviewing CEO of a company called Bloomreach,
Mm,
Raj Dadada, an amazing human, but he talked about just how much they doubled down on culture before they even created the business plan. They wrote the culture book, and thinking about you, I can tell that like these core values of how you look at this across the entire team and the impact across a team, whether it's 6 or 50 or 100. It's like you're thinking about, okay, well, how do we look at the entire whole, in terms of valuing that? And you look at companies like Bloomreach and even yours, Elemental TV, and others. I was speaking with the former CMO of Chick-fil-A a couple of weeks ago, and you hear about the early days of Chick-fil-A, how they doubled down on culture before anything else. They didn't double down on, oh, we got to make the best like food ever. They were like, how do we ensure that our operators and our team members at the local level, have this amazing experience with us, that when they come to work with us, they never leave. It's their intent to
right.
never leave. And then you look at the through line of Chick-fil-A right now in their category, they'll cross probably 20 billion this year or more, and they were never focused on growth. They were focused on how do we get better with our people. And the whole way they focused on that. And I think a lot of businesses can, of course, lose sight of that when they get to a certain size and scale. You go from 6 to 7 figures to 8 to 9 figures and up. Lots of things happen. Lots of complexity can happen. And I think some brands can lose that of like, wait a second. Like, and they just want to scale and grow faster. And I get
Right.
it. But I really think the ones that win holistically are ones like yourself and brands like Bloomreach and Chick-fil-A and others, where they don't just talk about how they invest in their people. It's like they think about these decisions very intently, and it all you look at the trajectory of where they go. It's not always up and to the right, but if you zoom out, you see this momentum being built, a massive flywheel, so to speak. So I love that you double down on that, and I think it's important. And it doesn't. I don't always see brands, big and small, do it that way, but the ones that do, I'm like, okay, that's a key ingredient. So um that's really beautiful. So Elemental TV creates new revenue streams for CTV publishers and provides advertisers with unique video ad formats not available anywhere else on the market. I want to know, how did you get to, because you came from the finance world, how did you get to creating Elemental TV? Tell us that kind of genesis story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I started my career in '98 at a bank called Solomon Brothers. That became Solomon Smith Barney, and then subsequently Citigroup. I was there until 2007, and I then made a move to Lehman Brothers. I was there for a year, and Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. I'm sure we all remember that.
Hmm?
I was unemployed, uh, and there were no jobs in finance. And I I think by that time I was done with banking, and I was in a position where I was like, well, I've been giving clients advice for a better part of the last 10 years. It's probably time to kind of build something on my own, which is something that I had always aspired to do. So um, uh, my focus was always in technology, media, and the intersection of that. I've always been a keen student of that space and where they intersect. So um, in the finance world, I was creating products for financial engineering, as I would like to call it. It came time for me to see how I can apply the same skill set with my analytical approach as to how to build products in advertising.
Wow.
So, so this is probably my fifth startup. Actually, this is the fifth startup, Elemental TV, which we started about 3 years or so ago. My first company was called BPO Solutions. And essentially, uh, the idea there was that I take a very deliberate approach when I look at an industry. I try to unpack all the key players and understand where the fragmentation is, where the friction is, and find opportunities where we can create value. We can't do everything. We can do some things, and we try to do like 10 things 10,000 times, and then that's essentially how we operate. So uh, fortunately, I have assembled a core team of people that I've had since 2009 that have stayed with me between engineering and data science and product development. And along the way, I've been able to fortunately partner up with other folks who've been able to help me deliver the vision that we have articulated. So the first business was focused on figuring out a way for advertisers to reach publishers who were otherwise not available on search. So back in 2009, the top 10 websites received 90% of the ad dollars. However, you and I spend 90% of our time on the long tail websites, not the google.com, but those were just the gateways. So what was going on, there was this artificial pricing pressure for buying audiences on these, call it the head websites. What I did, I said, I can go to the smaller websites and start representing their inventory in the marketplace. So we created an exchange and a marketplace, call it like a stock market, but for media, where we basically took principal risk and actually purchased the inventory from the smaller websites upfront, and then using some option math, figured out how much we can sell it in the open market, and then we found
Wow.
buyers and sellers for that. So same advertiser like a Geico.com, who will, for instance, pay, for example, $10 per click on Google.com, can buy the same user, right, same audience on a smaller website uh, that doesn't have that big a footprint, but for maybe half the price. And essentially, what you've done is basically improve the return on average spend or ad spend for that advertiser. So that business basically allowed us to generate a lot of value for our publishers that we worked with, and the advertisers basically moved over because they were able to acquire the same audiences. That business ran for a better part of 4 years, and then Google came in and started basically doing the same thing. So it's like so for me it was like, well, the opportunity has gone away because then we moved into email marketing and newsletter marketing.
Hmm.
Essentially, we found that newsletters were under monetized, and so we basically brought in advertisers to be able to advertise their brands inside newsletters. After that business, we saw a lot of issues with that business in terms of deliverability because um, uh, it's very sensitive to how spam filters in someone's inbox scans a certain newsletter. So there were some headwinds in that business. The business that we started, that was the second business. The third business that I started was essentially promoting app installs from desktop to mobile. That was called App Igniter, and that business didn't do very well. We shut it down after 1 year because it was not it did not meet the metrics that we wanted.
Wow.
So um, the fourth business was focused on building all our collective knowledge of data science that we had built over the prior years and offering it to publishers to optimize their inventory. It was called Yield Nexus. And in that process, we realized that the fastest growing medium was video. This is circa 2016, 2017.
Ah, okay.
Right?
Okay.
And this is essentially, we saw video growing on desktop, mobile web, and app. And about 3 years or so ago, we saw that a lot of these dollars are shifting to connected TV and CTV and streaming TV. Um, so we refocused ourselves to deliver these all our expertise into the connected TV space, which we believe is like a very big market. And throughout this whole process, the The recipe has been the same: large market, opportunity to very fragmented, lots of players, and how do you create efficiencies for buyers and sellers of media in that? Essentially, that has always been our. And then in that process, we build tools. In that process, we use data to guide ourselves. We look for the objective truth, which is not our assumption or someone else's assumption. We look at what the data tells us, and we let the data determine the direction of the business. Um, so yes, if Elemental TV is now exclusively focused on delivering these personalized ad experiences for the streaming TV environment. So I'll pause there. If you have any questions,
Yeah, no,
obviously.
no, that's great. I mean, so with the other businesses, I mean, were those all like sold? You said one was said one you shut down after a year, but like the other, did you sell those businesses? You shut those down as well? It's super exciting.
So I have not raised any institutional capital to run these businesses, and that was a decision we made because of being in finance and banking. Once again, going back to my ethos, that I saw a lot of internet companies raising a lot of venture capital.
Hmm?
Nothing against venture capital. I think there's a time and place for that. Um, at least the businesses that I was pursuing, I felt that if we raised a lot of venture capital, it will put us on a path that will take away the nimbleness and the agility to be able to move around and evolve. Oftentimes, what I observed, having taken a bunch of companies public, what I observed is that when venture capitalists gets involved, there is an element of discipline that is added, which is how to grow pretty much at all cost, how
Sure.
to acquire more revenue, how to develop a sales pipeline, and uh, the sales process becomes uncoupled or decoupled from the product development aspect of things. And when that happens, businesses try to acquire revenue at the expense of product development and the balance sheet of the business, both from an intellectual property perspective and also from a resource and actual growth perspective. You're buying revenue with an upside down balance sheet. You're just borrowing capital from someone else. But when these companies went public, public shareholders are a lot more scrutinizing. And when you're unable to maintain revenue growth from one quarter to the next quarter to the next quarter, particularly in markets where you don't have a lot of pricing power, when you have these large companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook basically always gnawing at your cookie, if that makes sense, they these companies failed. And who ended up holding the bag at the end of it were the employees.
Mm.
So I made a deliberate choice that venture capital, if I'm going to pursue something that is going to require venture capital, then obviously it makes sense. But in the businesses that we pursued, they were not suitable for venture capital. So the reason I mentioned that is because we self-funded each and every one of these businesses. We got them to profitability. And at one point, the first business had 120 employees spread across 5 countries, all the way from the US to China to Europe and Israel. And um, all that was through, self-funding. I mean, from the profits of the business. And then essentially, uh, we rolled that capital forward as we saw the opportunities developing into new businesses.
Is there a core team of folks that have been with you the whole time? Like,
That is
who are
correct.
these? Who are these superheroes? Not by name, but just like how many folks are there that
Yeah,
have been
there
with
are
you?
about 5 or 6 people who have always
Okay.
been with me,
Wow.
and I would not be here without them, obviously, and all the credit goes to them.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So and as I said, these skills are focused on data science, analytics, and a certain discipline that can be is transferable, I would say.
So what would you say is kind of the biggest challenge that you're up against and the biggest kind of puzzle you're working through now at the stage you're at now? What are you really keen on working on, fixing? What's got your full attention these days?
Yeah. So it's a very exciting space that we are in right now because the pandemic basically ripped the band-aid off streaming TV, meaning that a lot of people started using digital devices. So there's a lot of commotion in the market. There's a lot of stakeholders, and they're all trying to go for audiences, if that makes sense. Like um, there are your traditional broadcasters and then there are your broadband companies. They all want to be in the media business because that's what's create their ephemeral relationship with the audience and the brands. And uh, So there are the OEMs like Samsung, Vizio, and LG. They are basically making now these very smart devices that can act as your cable box replacement or your set-top box replacement. Then there are these dongle makers or auxiliary device makers like Roku and even
Hmm.
Apple TV and Chromecast, for example, or Google TV. And then you have your traditional broadcasters, Comcast, and they're becoming like large companies. Um, the problem that we foresee, what that we are seeing right now in the streaming TV business is that it is an advertiser demand constrained business, meaning that there are maybe 100 or 150 advertisers that make up a lion's share of the ad dollars that go into the streaming TV business. Because as you know, right, creating a 30-second video spot requires it's an industrial undertaking, right? Between,
Hmm.
I'm sure you are in the media business, you understand that you
Hmm.
got to like hire actors, you have to have a script, you have to have a show, you have to have a studio, you have to have a camera crew. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. It requires a significant amount of budget. Um, what we are trying to do is do two things. One, unlock the space for smaller advertisers. And that's where our ad personalization technology comes in. Is how to make it available to the masses, how to expand the total addressable market beyond the top 100, 200 advertisers to thousands and thousands of advertisers. Uh, your local plumber, your local electrician who wants to buy CTV ads in their DMA, for example, and how to help them create a creative that otherwise does not require them to spend an arm and a leg or hire a Photoshop expert to create a video ad. Because, he or she is only focused on their own trade. They're not in
Right.
the business of creating video assets, for example, for a
Exactly.
video ad. And then, so then that's one problem. The other problem is that uh, traditionally, TV advertising was bought using what's called GRP or some sort of currency, and Nielsen was that source of
Mhm.
truth, as I like to call it.
Right.
Uh, that world is changing. Measurement is changing. Uh, whereas on the digital side, inventory is not sold that way. So we are actually in the process of building this, what we could refer to internally as Project Link. Essentially, it'll allow us to create this translation layer using our data science expertise to connect the linear dollars, as I like to call them, or the broadcast dollars. It's circa about $60 billion, and somehow connect them to the streaming TV business. And that's where the opportunity is for us over the next 5 years, moving those dollars over, expanding the reach for the advertisers so that this medium, which is not going anywhere, becomes more meaningful for brands and for advertisers to create more meaningful relationships with their audiences.
That's amazing. So what's like the profile of your kind of ideal customer?
Agencies who are representing a broad set of dollars, both from um, local, the last mile agencies, and that are serving the yellow page advertisers, for example, national advertisers, companies and that represent agencies that represent that, and direct brands. And there's this new segment of direct to consumer that is now developing, right? Traditionally and historically, they have transacted on the social media element, but those dollars can also be shifted over to streaming TV because remember you have a shared device in a household. It's, choose your size, 55-inch, 65-inch TV, what have you, right? 1080p or 4K TV, and all you have is a remote with four buttons on it for the most part. And so, how do you create the relationship between that device and your phone that you're holding it all the time? So, we are looking for advertisers who want to operate at the intersection of that.
Okay, that's awesome. This is really this exciting, and I love that you've picked an approach, where you said you look at the market, you look at, where's the kind of underutilized opportunities here, and where can we essentially be a part of, helping. You're doing a few things in terms of improving the experience for, of course, the
Of
publishers and the
course,
advertisers, but ultimately the consumers as well. So you have this interesting intersection. We had, do you know Amagi or Amaji?
that's right. That's right. I
Yeah,
know
we
Amagi,
had
yes.
we had one of their chief product officers on. This was several months back, but similarly in this CTV space and the things that these brands are up to, it is exciting, quite exciting. Um, let's shift into kind of some fun questions, Omer,
Of
and
course.
then we can wrap. Let's do the lightning round questions. You ready for them?
Oh, let's do it. That's it.
Okay. All right. Let's do it. Okay. So for those of you listening for the first time, thank you so much for staying with us. If you have been here before, then you already know this podcast is sponsored by Salesforce. Salesforce brings marketing and engagement together. So if you want to learn more, head over to salesforce.com/marketing. Here we go. Omer Latif, CEO, Elemental TV. First question: texting or talking?
Talking.
Okay. What's one thing you love and appreciate about yourself?
Curiosity.
That's literally my favorite answer. So thank you. What's your favorite day of the week?
Tuesday.
Why Tuesday?
If
I
nothing
love
happened on
that.
Monday, I think Tuesday will be fine. The rest of the week would be
Okay,
good.
that's great. You're the first person that said Tuesday. I get a lot of interesting days, but you're the first that said Tuesday, so that's great. What's your favorite city in the U.S. besides the one you live in?
Washington, D.C.
Okay, okay. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
I think every language in the world, and that would include the language of the animals. So yes.
Oh, okay. Nah, see, you're the first person to say that too. So you keeping the bar high there, Omer. What's your favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Okay. Scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
An 8.
Okay, okay. Please fill in the blank. Something wise your elders taught you was.
Let the universe unfold itself in front of you.
Well said. I love that one. What superpower would you choose? Invisibility or super strength?
A super strength.
Okay, okay. Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
No.
Okay. If you weren't leading Elemental TV, what would you be doing?
Surfing.
Okay, okay. If you have one, what is your least favorite marketing buzzword?
It's too many.
I know, right? Any stick out, or we could just stick with too many? That's fine too.
I think it's too many is okay.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Difficult
What
point
would
for
you
now.
what would you go back and whisper in the ear of your younger self about being a leader?
Listen more.
Okay, let's do guest on guest, Dustin. If you want to pop on here, we'll pull this question up. And Omer, this question comes from a gentleman named Vuk who leads growth at a company called Lemlist. Do you know Lemlist?
Unfortunately, I don't. So
Cool. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so they're interesting, fast growth. Like they grew to like 0 to I think it was like 10 million ARR like really rapidly. Really kind of a cool story of how they did that. And so we had him on our show a couple of weeks back, and he chose your name and he asked a question for you. So Dustin, when you're ready, let's play this for Omer.
Hey Omer, Vuk here, Head of Growth at Lemlist. I'm really curious to know what are the next things you want to do in your content marketing strategy, so I can borrow some stuff from you.
Hey Vuk, this is Omer Latif from CEO of Elemental TV. Thanks for your question. I believe content marketing is a strong part of any business. Any good product is about good storytelling, and telling a good story about your business is very important. From my perspective, it's important to understand that any experiences that you create have to be immersive for the audiences that you're trying to address. It's always important to stay true to your North Star, is what you're trying to accomplish. And a good storytelling will always take you far. And that's how you resonate. And that's the power of brand marketing. And that's how you develop relationships with audiences.
This has been a great opportunity, a great show. Omer, thanks for being here. I'd love to stay connected with you as you continue to grow, and just such an honor. And thank you so much for being here today. Thanks again to Salesforce for making this show possible. To learn more, head over to salesforce.com/marketing.